Every page that I get deeper into Gypsy Rose's My Time to Stand, it gets just that more complicated. And she starts to talk about getting captured by the police and her subsequent jail time that followed. So I think it's important that we look into the next 4 chapters of this book to see exactly what was going on at that time. I'm going to include some relevant excerpts. I hope you guys enjoy this video. Thank you guys again for 2,151 subscribers. I really hope you guys enjoyed your Christmas holiday. I definitely enjoyed mine. A lot of preparation. Christmas is my favorite holiday, so I do tend to do the absolute most, right? Without further ado, let's get into the next 4 chapters of My Time to Stand. So Gypsy Rose titles chapter 15 of her book, The Hideout from Hell. And she tells us how she and Nick had to wait a couple days to go back to Wisconsin. After they went back to Wisconsin, she could see how Nick was truly living. She mentioned mold in his room, stuff all over the place. She insists that she went from one hoarder to the next. So not soon after moving in with Nick, she lets it be known that she was quite disgusted and taken aback by his lifestyle. With that being said, when they were hiding out at that Days Inn hotel, she makes sure to mention the brownie video when she says, right now he's eating a brownie, but later he'll be eating me. And she gives that up to being high on painkillers and says that she was in another world at that time. So all she could do is act in the manner that she acted in. I remember when I watched Gypsy Rose's interrogation video for the first time, I definitely said, what drugs is she on? Right? I did say that. I remember saying that because no one in their right mind would behave in such a manner. No one in their right mind would know what just transpired with your mother and your boyfriend and look all around as if they have no idea what's going on. So I definitely attributed it to an illness. And she said that she was pretty heavy on drugs at that time. I honestly do not doubt that. Upon arriving to Nick's place, she realizes this is not what I thought it would be. It's a mess. Allegedly, Nick always wanted her to be naked. She started questioning if her relationship with Nick was going to last. In chapter 15, she says, observing more of his lifestyle, I began to question how long I could live there. It was the first time I had any foresight. How would we live? Would I get a job? What would I do day after day? Without an anchor or a compass, I wanted my mother. And then I washed that thought right away with the Xanax and half an Oxy, rationing them now. So we learn here that merely 2 days after the act, Gypsy Rose is already missing her mother, already figuring out that, hey, maybe the grass isn't so green on the other side. And this life that Nick has here for himself isn't what I imagined. It's not what we talked about. It's not what we dreamed of. Kind of the moment where she says to herself, what have I done? So they are apprehended by the police. Gypsy comes out of the house first. She's asked so many questions by the police, she says, and Nick is thrown to the ground. At first, you guys know it was an alleged kidnapping. They thought she was a victim of this crime, but when they got to the police station, they soon figured out that she was a suspect in this case. Her and Nick's stories did not line up at all. They sat in the closet and talked about what their story was going to be, but once they got to the police station, things started to fall apart. Gypsy describes that falling apart as the detectives bet on a bluff, telling Nick that I had ratted him out. Then they sat back and let the he said, she said games begin. Nick named me the mastermind. I named him the monster. He said he was trying to save me from abuse. I said my mother was my best friend. He said I bought the knife, gave him the gloves, rounded the duct tape. I said he had a dark side and wanted to feed her to pigs and SA her body. He said my mother made people think I was sick. I said Nick was sick. So from that little passage of the book, I basically get that Nick was going in with the truth. After Nick realized that he wouldn't be able to lie out of this, he gave the truth. Gypsy resorted to, however, pointing the finger at her co-defendant to get some of that heat off of her. That, unfortunately, turned into a mess where she was saying literally the opposite of everything Nick was saying, and there was no mentions of abuse in her original interrogation video. Okay, so we get to chapter 16, and Gypsy's in the county jail awaiting trial. Now, this is when she first talks to her aunt, Rod's sister, Aunt Celeste, and from there she gets Rod's telephone number and she talks to Rod for the first time. She says under no restraints. She says she feels like her mother wasn't looming over her shoulder and she could actually talk to her dad and let him steer the conversation, let him assure her that everything would be okay. She describes that relationship with Rod. She says, even though he was grappling with his own shock, confusion, and anger about the scam that defined his life, my dad planted his feet behind the captain's wheel, navigating me, the way he never was allowed to when Mama was around. I agree, that's rich, but I have an issue with reading that bit of text. So you could have personal calls with Nick, you could have personal calls with Dan, you could have personal calls with any man that you saw fit, but you couldn't have personal calls with your father because Dee Dee loomed over you too much. It seemed like you wanted to talk to Dan, you wanted to talk to Nick. At that point in your life, you didn't have any interest in talking to your dad. To create the narrative that she blocked any access you would have to your dad, I find a hard time accepting that and rolling with that because you had time to talk to other people, right? It was you who, for whatever reason, didn't feel it proper or necessary to reach out to your dad. Gypsy then goes on in chapter 16 to say that she allowed her mother to dominate her in the way that Munchausen by proxy sufferers do. She says she also allowed Nick to dominate her as well. She had to bow down to whatever Nick said. So in chapter 16, she basically says, my life was defined by people who wanted to dominate me, whether it be my mother or Nick. Gypsy describes this as, being submissive was also familiar. My mother had wanted an infant. Nick wanted a slave. Both required them dominating me and me letting them. So then we go on to chapter 17. Chapter 17 actually made me cringe because Gypsy Rose talks about first getting to jail and being placed on Suey watch, right? She says that she only had a smock on at the time and her roommates were two naked women. And apparently she was in the psych ward as well as on Suey watch, and her roommates would play in their feces, allegedly. I feel like Gypsy put this part in the book to further hone in on her point that some of the inmates shouldn't have been there. They should have been in some type of mental health facility. She makes that claim in the book. She says if these people are this ill and they're playing with their own excrement, then why are they here? They shouldn't even be in jail. I can't really agree on that point because you don't know what exactly they're in there for. Some people would do better at a mental facility, but it depends on the nature of their crimes, their background, their history, to determine if there's some type of criminal aspect associated with that, or if they should go to a jail or prison instead of a mental facility. And I watch a lot of jail shows, guys. I kind of love the jail shows. And something that I notice about the people in there who seem mentally off, they're usually addicted to drugs for some reason or another. They're drug addicts, detoxing, and different things of that nature. There's a difference between someone who just needs help, medical attention, mental medical attention, and someone who's addicted to a substance and acting criminally because of it. She talks about her disturbed roommate in this chapter, saying, this roommate's meds would make her sleep a lot, waking only for meals, which she'd gorge herself on, and have several bowel movements. Playing with them seemed to bring her joy. In a way, this part of the book I feel like is garnering sympathy because people start to imagine themselves in that person's shoes. What if I was standing next to a person who was playing with their, how would I feel? You know what I'm saying? Like, this part of the book tries to garner that sympathy because of the terrible living conditions that can be seen in prisons, psych units, things of that nature. So she definitely brings that to the forefront. Gypsy says growing up, she prayed a lot. And I wonder where she learned how to pray from. Is this Dee Dee? Someone in my comments on last video said that how can Dee Dee be doing voodoo and also a Catholic? I really don't know. I feel like if someone's very, very religious, Catholics in the Southern Louisiana area, Southern Baptists in the Southern Louisiana area, if they're very, very religious, they don't interact with voodoo. They see voodoo as a sign of witchcraft. They see witchcraft as a sign of satanic activity. So I don't see those two going hand in hand. Could someone pretend to be a devout Catholic on the outside and is really practicing voodoo at home? Sure. But it just doesn't line up for me when she's talking about, I prayed all the time for God to get me out of this. She says she prayed and prayed and prayed, but after a while, she felt like she wasn't getting answers. So that's when her and Nick went down this dark path. For me, it speaks more to how she was raised up, what her mother believed. There was a lot of religious imagery around the house, remember? Tons of religious imagery around the house. So how do we tie that in with the alleged voodoo rituals that Dee Dee Blanchard was performing on her daughter? And Gypsy was alleging that Dee Dee was doing voodoo on her and putting cow tongues in jars and things of that nature. So how do we go from that to that? That's a very good point. Gypsy then talks about while she's sitting awaiting trial, she finds something which she would consider like a friendship, like a true friend for the first time. Gypsy goes on to say she tells this person very critical information about her crime. Gypsy does not go into detail and say what she told this other inmate. She just says she told them something confidential regarding her crime. Now, that person went to their lawyer and they tried to plea deal out of their case by giving information on another inmate. I didn't even know that was possible. That is a two-faced person, if you want to ask me. I'm going to give you information about somebody that's not related to my case or what I did at all in hopes that you will let me go a little sooner. Typically, when you get time off, it's related to the people that are associated with the crime you've done. So you befriended this person just to go back and try to get time off. Okay, so that comes to the forefront and Gypsy is told not to talk to her anymore. That's Gypsy's first taste of how people in the real world can be. Smile in your face and stab you in the back, right? And also in chapter 17, she signals missing Dee Dee. She says that she missed Dee Dee. Now, the first time she said she missed Dee Dee was right after. And then the second time she said she missed Dee Dee was when she was at Nick's house and realized it's not all apples and oranges out here in the real world. And then the third time she mentions missing Dee Dee is when she was in jail. She would always say, I miss my mom. I miss my mom. And the other inmates would kind of look at her like, are you serious? Like, what? What do you mean? We know why you're here. What do you mean you miss your mom, right? Ironically enough, she says she missed her mom. And guys, you might not agree, you may agree, but I do truthfully believe that at that time, she missed her mom. I truthfully do believe that there was a trauma in her upbringing. Not at all does it justify what she's done, but I do believe there was some significant trauma there that a lot of us haven't experienced throughout our childhoods, right? I also believe that there is a sense of remorse there, right? A sense of, I wish I would have never done this, right? The first 16 chapters of this book are her telling us, this is why I did it, and this is why I feel it should be justified. It's not. It's not by any means. But do I sense remorse? Do I sense regret and remorse? Yes, I do. I do sense that, and that's my personal opinion on the matter, right? Gypsy talks about how she would miss her mom in chapter 17. She says, during the day, I was living in a detached dream state. I cried at night often, telling other inmates I miss my mom. Some would suck their teeth or act baffled, but most of them gave me a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on. To me, that signals I know I shouldn't have done this, right? but it's too far gone now. Chapter 18 is where Gypsy gets transported to prison at Chillicothe Correctional Center. She describes prison as a freeing experience. Never have I heard anyone describe prison like this. I don't understand how it could be this magical for her, but the living conditions in prison, the people in prison, the way of life in prison is nothing nice. It's nothing good. It's something you have to learn to live with. So when we get into chapter 18 and she's describing prison this way, I was freer in prison than I had ever been my whole life living with my mother. I found myself frolicking in nature more than I ever could in a wheelchair, watching butterflies and slugs on Volunteer Way. A patch of grass on the side and a concrete courtyard opened my imagination. I was Fraulein Maria twirling on a hill. I was a Southern belle picking dandelions and fighting off Civil War suitors. I was Snow White yodeling to the forest creatures. Civil War suitors? Are you talking about the women in prison? Fighting off Civil War suitors. What? The poets, I'm going to call them poets, did a fantastic job of romanticizing the chaos that you lived through while in prison, because I've never heard someone say yard time in a woman's prison was like being a Southern belle picking dandelions. But I think this part of the book serves to show how much more free she felt, allegedly, in prison than with her mother. This is the most free I've ever felt in my life. She had me under lock and key. So being in a jail, fighting off all these women, allegedly, that's way better. That's what I'm getting. In chapter 18, she talks about how she never considered Nick a victim, but now she does because she sees herself as a catalyst for his crime. I'm pretty sure I've used the word catalyst before referencing these two. And you are the catalyst. He would not be there if it weren't for the catalyst. Fire wouldn't start if you didn't have the match, right? So she allegedly realizes that she was the flame that set Nick off in this instance. It happened, and the fire starter was in Gypsy Rose's hands. If she truly acknowledges that, that is a form of accountability, right? And also in chapter 18, Gypsy shares a long letter that she wrote to Dee Dee from jail. And she said she wrote it as if her mother was standing right in front of her. I took a part out of the letter that I found insightful. And that part says, "It would be many years before I was able to fully understand the reasons why I grew up being isolated from others, being taken to hospital after hospital, doctor after doctor, without anything being medically wrong with me. Waiting for the next time your hand was to strike me for simply trying to make a friend. Fear, manipulation, and isolation were all I knew of your kind of love. And the lingering question of why I was unable to be allowed the one thing that everyone else seemed to have, the ability of free will." Free will. I believe you definitely had free will. Free will led you to the decisions that you made, unfortunately. She continues to talk about how much fear her mother instilled in her, manipulation and things of that nature. But the letter in itself seemed to be another piece of accountability in chapter 18. She also acknowledges that her mother allegedly had Munchausen by proxy, disease, disorder, however you want to put that one. And something another person said that I found incredibly interesting about that is she wasn't here to be diagnosed with it. So how can we diagnose a person that's no longer here? I find that hard to do. We have very little from Dee Dee video-wise. We have very little from Dee Dee speaking to Gypsy. We have very little, limited of Dee Dee's actual feelings, emotions, voice. So her narrative is now controlled by Gypsy. Do we trust Gypsy Rose to do the right thing in her mother's honor and tell us what happened? Do we trust that? So for this video, I want to ask you guys, do you think Gypsy Rose has taken accountability for what she's done by way of this book? I'm going to give you a second to think on that. I want everybody to leave a comment and be honest, okay? No one's judging anyone. I'm not a judgmental person. Like I said, I'm open to all opinions from all over the globe. But I need you to sit with that and really think. Knowing what you know now, all the evidence we've talked about, do you think she's taken accountability in any shape or form? Put it down in the comments. If you think a little bit, a lot of it, none at all, let me know in the comments down below. You guys know where I stand on it. I hold a position that some people may not like, okay? But I'm definitely going to challenge the things that I see that don't make sense to me. During the rest of 18, she talks about how she builds and meets Christy and Rod while in prison. Now, they build their relationship over 8 years, and that 8 years is filled with anticipation of someone coming home one day. So I can definitely agree that that relationship will be strong. I can definitely agree that that relationship will be cherished for now, right? As you're waiting on someone to get out of jail, and it finally happens, so you want to keep the family unit and that person on the straight and narrow as much as you possibly can, right? In talking to Christy and Rod, Gypsy finds out that her mom blocked a lot of their interactions. Christy might have wanted to take her out, and Gypsy was told by Dee Dee that Rod was abusing Christy and they were cheating together and all of these things, right? She was told very bad narratives about Christy and Rod. Which, in a sense, can you blame Dee Dee? Because Rod knew Christy when they were married. I don't know what the nature of their relationship was, but they were friends, work friends, something of that nature when he was married to Dee Dee. And he left Dee Dee and got with Christy. So I don't expect for Dee Dee to have a favorable opinion of Christy in any reason whatsoever. When we think about it, Dee Dee was Rod's Ryan, right? Dee Dee was Rod's Ryan. How Gypsy Rose left Ryan and went back to Ken, the same thing happened to Dee Dee. So why would Ryan have good things to say about Ken? You see what I'm saying? You see where I'm going with that? I understand that one coming from Dee Dee. These 4 chapters really focused on Gypsy Rose's prison life, navigating through prison and settling in, knowing that she was going to be there for the next 10 years approximately. With that being said, there's 4 more chapters of the book, guys. I wanted to break this down so we could get a really good analysis of it. So the next 4 chapters, we'll be covering that, and I'll be posting a video on Saturday. But again, I want you guys to mull over in your heads that question I asked. Has Gypsy Rose taken any accountability whatsoever? I think the accountability she's taken is very low. Right? Let's put it that way. But there has been some accountability taken in these chapters when she comes out to say, I was the catalyst for Nick. When she writes the letter to her mom, allegedly, realizing that she played a role in this and portraying that in her book is what I wanted to read. I didn't want to read how horrible this person was or how horrible this person was or her victimizing herself. I wanted to hear what her role was in it. So let me know what you guys think if you've read the book. If not, go off of the evidence that you already have. It's been a really challenging read, guys. I'm not going to even kid with you. It's been a challenging read, but we're going to wrap it up by Saturday. And if you guys like videos like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, guys. Can you go back to like 3 of my videos and hit the like button on that one as well? Share button is huge. If you share it to an audience of more than 100 people, 50 people, we can get the word out about Lindsay Unfiltered. Not only do I talk about things relating to Gypsy Rose, we talk about conspiracy, scandal, true crime, celebrity stories, all kinds of interesting things like that. We just found an audience for Gypsy Rose, so we've been spending a lot of time on her case and her life after prison. This has been Lindsay Unfiltered. I thank you so very much for watching, subscribing, and tuning in. Bye now.